Good morning, everybody. Again, everybody like to sit down. This is the geospatial track. If any of you aren't wanting the geospatial track, you're in the wrong place. But it's hosted by the company I work for called Lucana, and I'm going to be hosting it today on their behalf. This will all be recorded, so you can get copies of it later on. I've been doing project management and all kinds of things in that field for many, many years. As you can see, I've got grey hair, and got more involved with Lucana about 3 years ago, and they do much more in the GIS field. So my personal interest is the way that integrates with project controls environments. So looking at how linear type projects are developed and looking at how GIS can associate with those. But that's basically my background. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about me. There's much more important things to talk about. We have 4 speakers today. Martin Turner, who works with me, who'll give the first presentation. Graham Neller and Warren Thomas will be giving the second one jointly. I'm hoping we can manage to share the microphone for that bit. And Robert is going to be giving the final presentation. Thank you, Robert. So, Martin, you're on first. And I think we have to stop and start the camera again. So if you can give me 1 second. Here's a clipper. Thank you. Oops. Sorry, you're going to need this one. With any luck, we'll go
anyway, so. Just shut if I'm a bit loud.
Just leave it running.
All right. It'll come up eventually, will it?
Yeah.
All right.
Is it not working?
I don't know.
Oh, before we start, should have said that. Gosh, it's in the wrong space.
Look at that.
We're having all kinds of fun today.
Apparently there's questions.
We're not asking any questions. We're not going to have questions during the presentations.
Oh, are we not?
We'll have a panel at the end and ask questions there. But if you want to use this operation, you can use that to ask your questions as we go through.
Make sure you set it to anonymous. I'll tip at that point. Oh, there we go. There's one about social media, so I'm going to skip that one.
Skip that one.
Oh,
Right.
there we go, my big tunnel. Morning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about technology today. I'm going to talk a little bit about social impacts. I'm going to talk an awful lot about this. It's a big tunnel, and it's underneath London's River Thames. It's 25 kilometres long, and it's quite an impressive thing. It actually went live last week, which is why I'm a bit today. We obviously, with all assets when they go live, things are a bit nervy. So I'm going to talk through that, give you a bit of an idea. We're going to talk about obviously geospatial and the value of it to try to build this. So this is a little bit about Tideway, the Tideway Project, which is where I've been for the last 13 years. To put it in context, this project's taken over 20 years to bring to fruition. It's not quite at the end, but it's getting very close. The idea behind it, really simple. That's the River Thames. What's the River Thames full of? Water. What's the water full of? As we've been seeing on the news lately, and over the last few years, it's full of sewage. So, to put it into context, in 1860 there was 2 million people when London's sewage network was designed. This is part of the problem in the water industry today. By 2019 it reached 8.8 million, currently it's about 9 million. By 2160, 16 million people, that's an awful lot. So to give you an idea about what it's about, I'm going to play a video now. Just give you, this will give you what the concept behind all of this is. So Tideway essentially is an environmental project. It's not a water treatment project or anything else like that. It's all about the environment. It's all about social good. Hopefully that's going to be on. I put that tunnel into perspective. It's 3 double-decker buses wide. It's 35 to 60 metres deep. It's 25 kilometres long. Costs a few quid, and it's got the capacity of 1.6 million cubic metres. 600 Olympic swimming pools. Anybody got any idea how many Olympic-sized swimming pools there are in the UK? Do you want to make a guess? 10. Who thinks there's 50? 30?
Less, probably. Less.
It is less than that. There's currently 22. If you took pretty much all of the Olympic-sized swimming pools in Europe, they still wouldn't fill the amount of sewage that can go through this. It's quite an impressive storage container, because that's essentially what it is. And obviously, we've built this thing right in the middle of the capital. And it is right in the middle. Reason for that is pretty simple. London's got 2 sewage networks, one in the north, one in the south. The overflow is called the River Thames. But before we could do any of that, we had to think about data, which is kind of the key to most things we do in the geospatial world. It's all about data and our approaches to data. So, you know, we've all seen slides like this before. What's good, what's bad. You know, we're all used to this. We'd all like to have that. And this is kind of how I see it in my world. You know, I start off, I've got loads of stuff, or I've got a big empty box, depending on what type of project you're working on. What we all want is something like that. And my slides aren't quite as clever as our futurists, but the whole aim of everything to do with our geospatial drive and our technology we've used, our strategies, processes, all of them are aimed at trying to get to here. So that leads you kind of in a pretty simple. So we're thinking about our virtual world, what our data could look like. You know, we can use an AI bot today to actually generate that if we wanted to. Does it make it real? No. But we can create that image. But more often than not, it looks like this. We end up with a big pile of what's it. So if we can do anything in our geospatial world, we've got to do something around our data structures, around our organisation of our information. Because the last thing we want is to end up with that. And as we all know, if you build on top of sand, it's all going to fall over. And it's really similar if you build on top of a waste dump. So it's all about good foundations for what we did. To put it into context, Tideway actually became a live utility last Tuesday. That tunnel is now functional. It was connected to the main network last week. So we took an approach to digital information. What, why, how. Knowledge and best practices. We spent many years looking at all of this, bearing in mind, like all projects, time evolves. There was no BIM standard in 2007. We had PAS 1192 and stuff like that, but it was all pretty limited. And it created a whole world of challenge. Today, much simpler exercise today. Technology's advanced a long way, but actually what we do hasn't. And I think that's something that sometimes gets lost in the technology debates. We will start off with a baseline. At the baseline point, we will have the technology expands, as we see, ever faster. People, we don't move as fast. We try, but we struggle. And ultimately, our processes and our technology evolve at juddery rates to end up where we want to get to. And that's going to sort of show out through what I'm going to talk about with our GIS systems. Ultimately, what we're trying to create is a connected data world. You know, there's lots of players in this space. We've got our stakeholders, whether they be internal, external, people who've got the money, people who haven't got the money, people who just have a responsibility for something. You know, when you're talking about environmental impacts of things, there are lots of people in the space. Then you've got all the usual suspects, we've got documents, we've got IT, we've got what are our obligations, what are our organisations, what's that governance around all of this stuff. I would suggest that in a mega project, something like Tideway, you're looking at 3 to 5 years to get that right, or at least get it to a state where it actually functions, which is quite scary. Today, maybe a bit quicker. We've got a lot more connected systems than we had when this started. And that's one of the challenges with it. It's when you have long life projects, how do you try and actually move those forward through the technology space? It's very difficult. That's where, many of us have interests in that and work for organisations that try to navigate that space. It's much easier if you're an asset owner, long-term organisation, to evolve your technology. Within a project space, evolving technology is quite a challenge. It takes a very different approach. You have to have a technology evolution plan, but the timescale of that plan is very short, and also the uncertainties around the technology evolution are massive. We've all seen in the plenary, some great examples of brilliant ideas that just never went anywhere. Google Glass is great. We looked at Google Glass to deploy it on construction in 2016. Everybody thought, that's brilliant. Did we actually do it? No. Could we have? Virtual AR, again, was something we looked at on the projects. Did we do it? No. Could we have done it? Maybe. Do we see it today? I was at a High Speed 2 site recently, most definitely. It's all about timing with technology, and that's a big challenge with a project, is how do you time the technology over what is essentially a 20-year life cycle. So I'm going to talk about my expert subject now, which is GIS. So we've got 3 kind of things behind our GIS. We're in every technology stack. Why? It's probably the first question that gets asked. Why do you use that? Why don't you use lots of different things? Well, the simple answer is it's easier for us to maintain it. We've got an evolutionary roadmap of the technology from the vendor. That's why we don't do open source. It's not because we can't do open source. It's not because that might actually give us better opportunities. It's actually by being vendor non-agnostic. I can't even think what the right word there is. Vendor locked, I suppose. Actually, in a project, that's sometimes beneficial because you've got some certainty about where you're going to go. When you already do something that's inherently risky, tunnelling under the River Thames is inherently a risky exercise. Trying to limit that risk is quite good. You've got some kind of horizon line that you can visibly plan around. So we went with ESRI's technology for our geospatial platforms. And then we thought about, why are we doing it? Why we even got a GIS? It's a construction project. What do you want a GIS for? What's the point of that? And that's quite a difficult and strange and wondrous conversation early on in the project as to why we even wanted one. It's only when you start to think of things away from the actual physical activity of building a site, there are probably much better tools for managing your site construction, your site visualization than a GIS system. It's a handy tool, but it's not the best tool. But actually what it's quite good at is also bringing along all those other areas around a project that so often we don't focus on. It's the stakeholder engagement, it's the people management, it's the mobile workforce, it's people doing things that aren't strictly construction tasks, but actually they're really important. It's the guy who wanders out and puts up notices along the street that says we're going to be building in this area. How do we manage that? How do we report on it? How do we convince people we're spending money wisely? Because whilst Tideway is a privately funded project, we still have to report back to the regulator. We still have to demonstrate we're not just wasting what eventually will become customer bills. We can't, we aren't a private company just going to do what we like. We still have to ultimately show to Ofwat what we've done is not, unreasonable. So we took the view that, the best way for us to actually manage that was through our GIS. In that video at the start, I showed that's actually built from our BIM models and our GIS and augmented reality and a whole bunch of other things. The scary thing about it is we made that video in 2016, believe it or not. But it's only now we actually use it, because we need to explain about what we did. But it was all because we planned and we thought about what we were going to do and how we were going to connect our data together. We were able to do that at the time. So, yep, as I said, we're an ESRI shop on the project. We've got a really simple technology stack, actually. It doesn't get much simpler. But it's all about understanding the bits of a technology stack that are going to help you in different days. So, we do scripts and stuff. This is a little bit out of date. Server 10.2.2. We don't use Server 10.2.2. We're not quite that antique. But another thing you have to think about is, with the life cycle of a project, is where does your technology evolution stop, actually? Because this is going to, in 2 years' time, this project will be finished. We'll have handed over all the asset information to the asset operator. We'll have no need for any of these tools. So when do I stop evolving my technology is quite a key thought in the geospatial sense. It does make a difference, and depends on what you do, how you take a view to that. And we looked at ways we could do things with our stack and getting the various values out of it, and that's where Locana came into the project. Essentially, we're part of the client business, for want of a better description. So we effectively work for the asset owner side of it. We don't have any GIS in our construction teams or in our construction companies. It all sits within the core. There's a reason for that, because it enables us to have one set of data. We all operate from the same play sheet. How people use that information and what systems they feed it into is a bigger question, and we don't have a specified, oh, I'm doing well. I've only got 2 slides left. So we looked at how to actually use that and how to think about what we were trying to do. It's not just about project manager. Project managers are a big part of major construction. They don't actually do anything physical on site, but they have to manage everything. There's loads of things going on. There's hundreds of tasks a day going on across a project the size of ours. We've got 25 construction sites. They're all being managed all the time, pretty much in real time. How do we do that? How do we think about it? And it's all about being able to share what those people are doing. So we've got people sitting in offices, and in fact, with COVID, we're not in offices. The video made me laugh, 1,001 acronyms to describe actually what we want to do is sit at home and not have to go into the office. Sometimes there's some benefits to it. So we utilise our technology stack to do that and capture that data in and or share it out and action things. Which is great for people doing those tasks, and that's where having a stack helps that's joined together. But also we've got, at our peak, we had something like 4,500 people on site, but we want to share all that with them as well. Again, the advantage of the platform with Chuck, having a unified platform, was to do that. It gave us that ability to push a view-only perspective of materials, but we aren't recreating stuff. It's all the same stuff. It's the same data all the time. So if the project manager goes and makes an update to something, ticks a box, fills in a form, back end processes, upload it or recode it or adjust the value, that actually is then fed out to everybody within the program pretty much instantaneously. As soon as you hit refresh or you pan or zoom the map view, the data's going to reload. It's going to reload with the latest and the greatest version of everything. So we've got our workflow process tools. We've got a big platform, old school style Google Map type viewer. And of course, we've got stuff, if you're a PM or you're a PM, you're doing things, but then you're reporting upward. So traditionally in construction sites, what happens? millions of people spend thousands of hours. You know, I dread to think how many hours you can spend on this on a 15-year life cycle project, producing reports. You know, weekly report, daily reports, hourly reports, in some cases depending on quite what you're doing. But by feeding the data back through our geospatial platforms, using some of the tools we have the ability to access to hook into, because we'd taken that longer term view when we set up what we were going to do, it's enabled us to build out a whole load of these type reporting dashboards. And we've got quite a few of these, not surprisingly, in a project at that scale. But again, you know, that tells the observer everything they need to know from their perspective. And that's the whole point of a lot of what we did. And then lastly, we've got the most important stakeholder group probably in our world today. We're a sewage project. Everybody's up in arms about sewage in the river, sewage in the seas. Everybody wants to know, what are you doing about it? How much are you spending on trying to sort this out? Actually, we're spending about £4.5 billion sorting this out just for 20 miles of river. It's not a lot of river, but actually, we're only going to sort it out in 20 miles of river, but it's going to sort out everything estuarywards of that as well. So that's another 60 miles. So actually, when you start looking at the downstream consequence of taking actions in certain spots, it enables us to play that out and say, actually, yeah, we're doing a project here, but actually the benefit cone, so to speak, of that action is so much greater. The wider implication of that. So lastly, you know, we've used some SaaS. We use ESRI SaaS platforms. Aren't just online. I'm sure most people are pretty familiar with the product, if nothing else. You know, that's how we communicate our data out to the public. This is a shot of our TBM tracker that we had running when we were doing the actual tunnelling. This ran for about 5 years, had just over 1.25 million hits, I think it was, at the end of the day. It enabled anybody with an interest, you know, it's the fabulous thing about it, it's anybody, to see what we were doing. Now, I'll caveat that this didn't run live real time. And there was a reason behind that. We had the data real time, but we actually put a time filter into it. And the reason for that is because at certain points when you're tunnelling, you have to actually stop the machine to do maintenance and repair work. You've got issues around supply. You're always trying to run a just-in-time supply chain to feed the machine, but you can't always achieve that. People want to have holidays. The TBMs do stop. They don't stop for very long, normally. However, during COVID, we actually stopped a TBM at Hammersmith, underneath the Hammersmith road bridge, for 3 months. That's incredibly risky. In real terms, because what happens is the ground pressure alters, puts pressure on the TBM itself, and it can get stuck. So it's quite a high risk action, but we had to take it. We didn't have any choice. Government said, stop, we had to stop. But under normal course of operations, you have days, or you have a few days where there was downtime. Sorry?
That's essential.
Yeah. Oh, I'm out of time. That's good, because I'm out of slides.
Oh, okay.